Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I was just looking at my watch to see that I can keep time. Unlike some of the earlier sessions, I think they've gone a bit over the top. But thanks for giving us a good audience after lunch, which is normally not the case with conferences because after lunch people peter out. And we are going to look at the future applications of technology in warfare in the context of drones, which is really becoming the go-to weapon system and the go-to platform, particularly for the army, but also for the other services, including the paramilitary forces. And we have with us two experts who are manufacturers and therefore they are trailblazers in the field of drones and their use in modern warfare technologies. Now, as the anchors and the masters of ceremony have just told us that increasingly technology is going to change the game on the battlefield, though I'm a traditionalist, and I still believe that the man on the ground will be your final decisive element in any conflict, at least for now. Though the world is trying, spearheaded by the Americans, to try and have a conflict scenario where you have non-contact warfare, which means that you use technology and the other uses technology, and whoever's technology is better gets the better out of the two. Now, we have a situation in the world and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, which gives us an idea of how things are going to pan out. And drones have played a dramatic role there in stalling Russia's military efforts by providing reconnaissance, by providing top attack armor, because tanks are best fortified from the front. Historically, the fire on tanks came from the front, but they are light on top where the commanders sit and drones are hitting them and decapacitating them. But also the intelligence gathering, the information gathering, and target acquisition for long-range artillery, all part of drones. But here we have two makers of drone technology who are going to take us into the next generation of drone-related conflict technology. And we have with us Mr. Raghavendra Reddy, who is the founder and director of Absolute Composites Private Limited, a Bangalore-based company. And amongst other things, he has made an unusual application for the armed forces, which is a flying soldier onto the battlefield and beyond. Some of you may remember from the field, from your experience of watching Sean Connery in Thunderball, where he suddenly puts on this gear and this outfit, and he escapes from a situation, flies into, sits in a car and drives off. Now, that's the kind of people that Raghav's technology is going to be giving capability to in the battlefield, and we will discuss a bit more about how best it can be used in future warfare. I hope the military decision makers understand what he has to offer. And we have Dr. Sarita Ahlawat, who has a strong academic record with a PhD in microbiology, interestingly, from the University of Illinois in Chicago, but here she is more into scientific technology. And she has been making drones in swarms. Now, people ask, what is swarms? It's like a whole swarm of birds. Some of you would be familiar that every winter the Siberian cranes come in large numbers from Siberia to bird sanctuaries like Bharatpur. And interestingly, in one of my TV shows, I was discussing with a general who seemed to be quite familiar with it. You know, there are some masterminds in the swarm group which lead the swarm in a particular direction. So it's not that you just let them and create sort of confusion in the minds of the enemy that what these swarms are doing, but they can be launched with a purpose. Now, she already has manufactured swarm groups of about 3,500 swarms, but she is now looking at another world record, which is 7,500 swarms. And I was trying to understand from her till I got pushed into this hall that how is it 3,500 into 2, which becomes 7,000, how is it going to be any less or any different from a bigger group of 7,000? But we will discuss that as we go along. So I'll first ask you, ma'am. Now, swarms serve many purposes. The biggest purpose, to my mind, is the psychological impact of swarm drones when you're sitting in a trench, and this is the situation that our soldiers are largely faced with, both against Pakistan and China. And China is a world leader in making drones. And the drones made their real impact. And let's not for a moment forget the so-called Iranian drone attack on Saudi Arabia's Aramco facilities, and which caused a stir, or the Houthis using the odd drone to hit Dubai, I think. But the fact is that drones in large numbers can be a game changer. How can they be a game changer? Oh, sorry, that's lost.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarita. A little bit correction. So I do have PhD, but my focus was mostly on imaging. 3D imaging had been my PhD and postdoc emphasis. And after coming back to India, I ran into my two co-founders from IIT Delhi, Anuj and Tanmay. And then we started working on drones because drones is comparatively a easier technology and a more of an upcoming technology to work with. So now, how did we land up with swarms and how swarms can make a huge difference across the board when we talk about only defense applications? So first we were making individual drones, and then we realized from IIT group, so we could probably add a advantage by developing a swarm. What the swarm means is when you have a number of drones operated by a single user. So in 2018, our group was the first one to have built a swarm of 10 drones. And we demonstrated to Indian Army on Army Day, and then we took our systems to Pokhran for the validation. And in Pokhran, we realized that building a technology defense grade takes a much more than working some systems in IIT Delhi. And so then we started building technology completely in-house, and eventually we were able to connect more than 3,500 drones recently. So now coming back to how a swarm can actually help, and I think everybody has talked about India and Russia war. Drones have significantly been enabling one side or the other, but swarm on the other hand has not been used as much because swarm technology is still in infancy stage. In India, the capability is currently where the drones are talking to each other, they're smart, they have intelligence built in, and they can go a distance of, let's say, beyond 20 kilometers. It's still very limited in India. So the most groups that in our country can demonstrate is maybe at most 20 kilometers. And when we talk about swarms, we also talk about a different kind of UAVs, can be small or big. So all these things are still yet to be worked out. But in future warfare or even any other drone application, you will be seeing more drones because anything a single drone can do, multiple drones will be able to do much better. And I think...
Okay, so that's well explained, and I'll come back to you, the dual use of technology, because your swarm drones can also have enormous dual use impact. One of the things is that the drones can actually alter information acquisition process because your swarm in large numbers can cover the tricky boundary areas such as the LOC, which is 740 kilometers, and the LAC with the Chinese now, which is more in the news, is another 300-400 kilometers. So the swarms can actually go out in a horizontal pattern, picking up information quickly, allowing commanders to draw the big picture to see where to focus on. But I'll come back to you on some of these issues later. But Dr. Raghav, now I need to understand from you the space suits or the drone suits that you make. As I was telling you over lunch, that you need to have a tactical approach to that Because it's one thing to exhibit scientific capability. It's another thing to put it to good use for national use. So what do you have in mind?
As of now, it's solving the technology problems with a view of some sort of applications for sure. As these are very, very new, which we are seeing, world over, we would have probably seen about 4 or 5 individuals or maybe small companies who are attempting to work on such technologies. The first jet suit, it was called as rocket belt. Why? Because it used rocket propellants, hydrogen peroxide kind of propellants, right? So it's been almost 60 years since then, and we have not seen any significant improvements in terms of compact, wearable personal air mobility. Applications, I'm sure there can be lots and lots of applications, both in the civil area and also in the defense area. So our focus has been to solve the technological, or rather technology problems in terms of propulsion, in terms of giving more autonomy to it, more safety, and also being compliant to the regulations, right? So that's the technology part of it. And talking about the applications, to directly move into the civil space, we need to deal with DGCA here and FAA elsewhere. There has been a good interest from the armed forces. Even before we started to even fledge, there has been some interest. And we are already talking to the armed forces to understand what kind of applications do they need it for. Are you
speaking to the Army Research Bureau in Bangalore?
Army Research Bureau, yes. I think they have a small extension of ADB. Yeah. Applications, we would like end users to come and rather talk to us on what's
okay. So, 2 points quickly. One is when you talk of the military, you only don't look at offensive purposes. There are logistics and defensive purposes that your kind of equipment can help.
Yes.
For example, carrying medical supplies at short notice to frontline. By the time a vehicle or a helicopter reaches there, it takes much longer. There are processes involved which are very time consuming, longer than the flight time. Yes. But your chap can fly in, a doctor can fly in with that and immediately attend to serious cases. Also, passing information at double quick time when your cyber network and your phone network is jammed. You can send a messenger with that. Commanders can reach the spot on quick time to actually stand on the ground and see how the situation's evolving. There are historical examples of that commanders on the ground altered the situation when they got to the ground as against sitting with a map and a command room. But I'll come back to you with something else. Dr. Sarita, now I need to understand from you, how do you hope that your swarm can actually be commanded by pilotless drones in multiple locations at the same time? If the situation unfolds and there is firing near Kargil and there is firing near Jammu, but your swarm is required. Now, is there some way of somebody controlling it or they can just go and send photography back?
That will be very futuristic, but currently, let me paint you a scenario where what rest of the world is doing. So if you look at how US and China operates, so swarm, currently they are also operating at 50 at max. So you take 50 drones, and because as I said, the range is limited, so they have them packed in in a truck. So you move the truck near LOC and make them take off from there. or you can have them in a plane.
Yeah,
And they
20 kilometers range is good enough.
Yes.
Because if you're not offensive, you can be well behind the line of control and not be shot at, because most of the ammunition used to hit helicopters and other things don't have a range more than 4 kilometers. So you can be at a distance and still get you photography, still get you information. But just explain to us, what kind of command system did you have in mind?
Yeah. So, the second is that you can operate them from air, or you can operate them from a vehicle. And the current system that we have built, in that each drone has a camera. In addition to a payload, it can see individually and communicate to the base station and also among themselves. And so you talked about master when you talked about birds. So in drones also you can have different kind of topology. You can have master and slave, one drone controlling rest of the systems, and they collectively decide that what they need to do, scan an area or take some action. But the kind of system that we are building now, so if any of the system is brought down, even if the master is brought down, the rest of the slaves can decide who is going to be the master by a consensus, and so the operation is not affected. So what we have in mind going forward is, because the range is limited, command can be, so what we are putting is a repeater system. So if you want to increase the range of the swarm, you can have a drone follow the swarm and then increase the range.
I'll come back to you. Think over the next question, and that is, what kind of funding, what kind of government support are you looking at? Well, I'll come back to you afterwards. Okay. Dr. Raghav, now I need to understand from you the military applications of offensive use of drones. Let me give you an example. That if you want to carry out a commando raid across the LOC, a group of 10 well-trained commandos can play havoc on the other side. Remember 2611 just had a handful of people and they created mayhem in Bombay. So a good trained commando outfit, they call them teams. Now, they can actually completely, psychologically block the commander's thinking if behind his back attacks are taking place. And your chaps can fly about 10 kilometers range, so they can take off from this side, from Uri, go there, land up, blow up a headquarter, come back. Now, have you thought of that? And the second thing is, the one area that we were talking about is the possible minefield crossing. But again, minefield crossing, you will need to provide equipment to at least 35, 36 soldiers for a platoon to go across to remove a nest of 8, 10 soldiers on the other side of the minefield before you cleared the path for others to go through with more elementary means of clearing a minefield. Now, what is the kind of funding that you would require, say, for 35 suits as against 150 suits, as against 800 suits, a battalion level? So what is the numbers you're looking at? I mean, because I'm told the 1,000-odd drones that were used, and somebody said so the other day in a conference that I hosted, had an expense level of about 65 lakhs. Am I wrong? What is the kind of money you're looking at?
I think that question...
Yeah, I'll ask her, but what is the kind of money you're looking at?
For the...
Yeah, human, each suit, what is the kind
okay.
of thing you're looking at? We can multiply. When it goes into scale, it'll obviously, the cost will come down.
See, the cost of a jet suit, not just the jet suit, but I mean anything for that matter, with volumes, the cost would drastically come down.
I know.
Right? As of now, it's in the prototyping stages. You know, we are still improvising. There are more and more versions of the jet suits are yet to come. Based on the endurance and the capabilities and the ranges, etc., and what kind of safety levels, you know, what kind of compliance requirements. Why? Because compliance is a huge cost for us, right? So, and ultimately, you know, we are going to offer the systems only with compliance, right? Either it is military use or even the civilian use. So, see, the cost of developing one jet suit as of now has been about $500,000 USD. Which,
yeah, but that includes R&D.
Yes,
yeah.
Right. So, going ahead, if we are looking at hundreds of them, you know, each suit could be about 1 crore of rupees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's an acceptable figure considering the fact that, what are you going to look at? 150, 200 crores? That's the cost of one fighter
Yes,
aircraft,
yes.
even lesser.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So I'll come back to you on that. Now, Dr. Sarita, I need to understand that swarm drones require government funding. The problem has been till now that DRDO seems to get most of the government handouts, most of the support, and it's a sort of comfort option for the government to go for, and I mean the bureaucrats in the Ministry of Defense, that, oh, you know, DRDO is our trusted white elephant, so let's put little fodder more in front of it. But what kind of expectation you have from the government to support this? Because the former Army Chief General Naravne was on record to say that the last century was dominated by tank warfare. The coming century is going to be dominated by drone warfare. And drones are not just, we're not talking about drones usage only in ground operations. We're talking of their usage in naval operations. We're talking of their usage in even air operations. So your expectations from the government should be high, because the Prime Minister has said that they want India to become the drone manufacturing hub of the world. I think it's a tall order, considering the Chinese are well ahead of us. The Turks are also manufacturing a lot. So what is your expectation?
Sir, I just want to make a couple of points. So, pehli baat to expectation when people look at drones is the movie reference that Uri you make. So, abhi, where the drones are, where the is shown in YouTube and movies is still a huge gap. So, the drones are not as advanced, not just in India, nowhere else. There are limitations. And the second, when you think of cost, as my co-panelist said, the cost of R&D is a lot. And I think when you talk about in India, we want a product, but we don't want to invest in the R&D and the tough cycle of a product development. And that's what we've been seeing with every technology, and with hardware, you see a lot more. So the kind of money you need, and depending on what kind of system you are looking for. So let me give you one example. So in Russia-Ukraine war, the Turkish drone gets mentioned a lot. Bayraktar, right? It's a warfare kind of a drone. It took around $250 million to get this thing ready. And also, we don't have time in India. We want everything made yesterday.
Yeah.
Right? So it took, from the day it was made, it took 9 years till their army inducted it. So in that 9 years, that product, especially a defense product, gets fine-tuned to the application. So it's not only just the money, that you also need this patience of providing test fields, certifications. A lot goes into building a technology. So when it comes to drones, so for example, us. So in India, nobody gives you funding at the initial stage when you have an idea.
Yeah,
literally have suffered lack of funding for 5 years. Till we had something to show off, then we started getting some funding, and most part we have been funded by government.
Right.
So now let me give you figures in what it takes to make a swarm of 10 drones. So one drone with because you need thermal camera and all, it would be in the range of 12 to 15 lakhs just bill of material, not adding the manpower.
Understood.
And then you multiply by number and the base station, so it runs into a simple swarm will run into crores, 2 plus crores.
Yeah, I'm completely with you on this. I think what's important, and here's a suggestion, that you must establish contact with the army, in particular, that needs drones, and get them to work with you on specifications. There's a limitation on the Indian front, and the limitation is you first make a product, and then these chaps land up from army headquarters and they say, oh, it shouldn't be flying that low, it needs to fly a little higher. I did a conference 2 years ago, and I remember the late General Bipin Rawat suddenly said, oh, I need drones that fly over 14,000 feet. And luckily, the drone manufacturer had a film running next to him, which showed that the drone going over Khardungla Pass. I said, there it is, it's going over 19,000 feet. Kehta, हाँ यार, ये तो बहुत बढ़िया चीज़ है. He told his staff officer, ask him to come and see me. So what you need to do is you need to match the only of the 3 services that really works closely with the industry is the Navy. So I think the Army and others, you need to push for it, you need to promote yourself, and then we are talking business. Now, finally, last question to you. What is it that you would expect from the government?
Funding, though we've been trying, I have understood that it's impossible to get any fund from the government, number one. Why? Because there are no routes and channels for the government to fund the private companies directly. Of course, now there are, DST and IDEX, etc. But one major setback in that is they take a lot of time and too much of paperwork, which I think is how it is. I have no complaints over that, but can we take it up? Do we develop the technology, work on technology, or spend all the time in doing the documentation part of it and then sending them papers after paper, volumes of that, right? So we have also understood that on the private funding side, essentially there is no fund for R&D.
Yeah,
no fund for research and development.
I'm with you, and time's up. I think what you need is somebody to champion your company's work, because there's one thing to innovate and design and create. There's one other thing to find a suitable buyer. Now, we are totally out of time, and thank you very much for your brilliant insights. And I think all of us have got a little closer understanding to the whole business of drones. Most importantly, and I think that's the underlined aspect, you need the government and you need the services to come out and support you. Otherwise, Atmanirbhar Bharat, at least in the drones field, will remain a dream. Thank you very much.